Hey everyone, I'm Carol Diane, and this is Happiness Reclaimed. You were born for the pursuit of happiness, which means rising toward your potential, mentally, physically, and spiritually, living a life of love with deep meaning and purpose. We're leaving behind the emotional stress, bad health, and empty spirituality of today to practice powerful life strategies in a mind, body, spirit approach to wellness. It's time to reclaim your life. Let's go.
I'm Sharon Thiel with Life Changing Radio, and I have the pleasure today of visiting with Carol Diane, a member of Samaritan Ministries International and the author of the new book, Happiness Reclaimed. Good morning, Carol. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Sharon. Good to be here.
Well, this is an interesting book, and your story is most interesting. Please tell us a little bit about how you discovered Samaritan Ministries and why you chose to join them, and how that ties into the creation of this book.
Sure. Well, I first joined Samaritan Ministries, probably 12 years ago. And at the time, I did not have health insurance. And so for me, at that time, it was one of the great things that I think they offer, and that is it's a low cost alternative to health insurance. And so it became my replacement for health insurance and much more affordable than any insurance that I was able to obtain. And so that was my primary reason for joining. And in the last 12 years, I have been recommending it to everyone for all kinds of specific reasons, which we'll cover as we go through this conversation. But that was my initial reason. However, when I turned 65, I was eligible for Medicare, but I kept it as a form of a supplement. And yes, I do have a regular supplement to Medicare, but it serves as a second supplement. And that is actually one of the things I am most excited to tell the general public about. And what I mean by that is the reason why I see that as so valuable and so exciting. But we can get into that now, or we can wait, whichever way you want to go.
Well, a healthcare sharing ministry is a very unique thing to some people. They're not familiar with it. And so your experience, I think, is very relevant here. And I know you fought a life threatening disease and faced death, and you've been a former clinical counselor, a teacher, a chaplain's assistant. You've had many experiences, all of which apparently have impacted your decision and pleasure in being involved with a healthcare sharing ministry. So, yes, please do tie that together for us and tell us how that led you to reevaluate your own personal happiness and write this
Yeah,
wonderful book, Happiness Reclaimed.
sure. Well, in the beginning, I really didn't, by that I mean when I first joined, I really didn't have much in the way of health issues. But at some point, I realized I had macular degeneration. So they helped me get regular medical care for macular degeneration. But then, now about 4.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometrial cancer, which is also called uterine cancer. And that, of course, is more scary, even more scary than macular degeneration. And Samaritan Ministries has been literally what I would call a lifesaver. And I don't think that's too much of an exaggeration, and I can explain why. The number one reason that I am so excited about them, and the reason I reached out to them and said, hey, would you mind if I recommend you in my book? The reason for that is because Samaritan Ministries, in addition to being a low cost alternative to health insurance or a low cost supplement to your other insurance, whichever way you want to go. In addition to that, Samaritan Ministries, by having the members help each other with medical costs, is willing to reimburse for what I call the more cutting edge, functional, some people would say holistic doctors who are perhaps cash pay only, and many of them have chosen to opt out of the regular insurance world. And so in order to access them, you need to go cash pay. And Samaritan Ministries is willing to also reimburse for them, assuming they have proper credentials and all of that sort of thing. And that allows somebody like me, a cancer patient, to reach out to doctors who are on the cutting edge. And it is a tremendous advantage, first of all. And let me give you a specific example. One of the cash pay doctors that I consulted with almost right away got me started on a high tech circulating tumor DNA blood test. And this test is called Signatera. The company is Natera out in California, I believe. And it is able to detect cancer or cancer recurrence anywhere from 2 to 10 months, depending on the type of cancer, before it can even show up in imaging. So it gives you a way to monitor how you are doing with your cancer battle. And the interesting thing is, I have been in 4 different states, as I document in my book, Happiness Reclaimed, which is not just about cancer, it's about life in general. But in the cancer section, I explain that that test allowed me to keep track of what was really going on and get very early notice of what was going on with my cancer. And the interesting thing was, in the 4 different states, I found that the traditional oncologists not only were not using the test, they had not even heard of it. And yet, now, after a certain amount of time, the test became so well validated that even Medicare covers it. So, this is just one astonishing example of where Samaritan Ministries was able to help me access something that was cutting edge science that the traditional doctors would not have even known to tell me about. And I think that's a very dramatic example. And what I'm even and more broadly excited about with Samaritan Ministries is because this willingness to help us get to these more functional doctors. And for those who don't know, I use the term functional to mean they truly are dedicated to helping you find the root cause of your illness, not just treat symptoms. And they also, because they have perhaps stepped away from traditional insurance, they have more freedom to pursue these cutting edge options. And so they can help us really be more successful in fighting our illness and getting to the root cause. And I've been, as I talk about in my book, I have been holistic ever since I had allergies way back in my late teens and early 20s. And I really believe in you have to get to the root cause. You don't just want to treat symptoms, you know. So, for example, when I had allergies, well, what was causing my allergies? Why is my immune system overreacting? And back then, you know, I'm old enough that that was quite a long time ago that I was that age. And back then, medicine really wasn't helping us at all. But now, fast forward a couple of decades, and we have this available, and Samaritan Ministries is helping us access this. And so it is literally saving people's lives. And that's one of the reasons I like to say Samaritan Ministries has helped to save my life. But I would also add another thing I love about them is, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but the more businesses you call nowadays, the more we're likely to talk to a computer system. artificial intelligence, and sometimes it can even be hard to get to a live human being. And sometimes you really need a live human being to solve your problem. And it's very frustrating in today's world. But by contrast, Samaritan Ministries, one of the few businesses I've encountered where when you call in, you get someone who is kind, helpful, knowledgeable, and you have immediate access to a live human being. And in today's world, I treasure that so much. So I'm very excited about them. And that's a short summary of why I reached out to them and said, would you mind if I recommend you in my book? Because I see them as at the forefront of this revolution in the medical world where we are switching to a more functional, holistic approach. And we're really looking at root cause and we're trying to get to real solutions for people at the lowest cost possible.
That's extremely interesting and very, very informative. I am so glad that we covered that information because there are very few sources for that kind of support out there. I know that from personal experience. So let's move on. We don't have a tremendous amount of time to chat today, and I do want you to touch on Happiness Reclaimed, your new book, and how personal transformation starts with small, intentional changes.
Sure. Well, let me begin by just explaining that the ministry Happiness Reclaimed is what I call, perhaps just for marketing reasons, a mind, body, spirit approach to wellness. And of course, I'm always advocating for that functional, holistic approach. And throughout my book, which is called Happiness Reclaimed, even though I've done other books as well, but the one that's called Happiness Reclaimed is constantly coming back to this theme that mind, body, and spirit are amazingly interconnected. And you don't even have to be a Christian to understand that because science research is proving this to be true. And even the medical world is embracing this truth. And that's why you are seeing more and more the medical world switching to what we call integrative medicine. And so they are slowly starting to incorporate mind and spirit into physical health. So I'm sort of on the cutting edge, you might say, of our cultural change here that's happening here in the US. And so I am very holistic, meaning wanting to incorporate mind, body, and spirit. So let me give you a specific example of how that works. Say, for example, someone is struggling with depression. Well, gosh, we could look at that in all three ways, right? Mind, body, and spirit. We know that our thoughts and what has happened to us and how we think about those thoughts, those experiences, all of that could possibly help to cause depression. But now, with cutting edge research in the field of health, we also know that actually what's going on in the gut microbiome actually can cause depression. And so that is a matter of physical health. What are we eating? How much sugar are we consuming? Are we exercising? What kind of toxins are we consuming? What's going down into our stomach that could destroy the, balance of bacteria in our gut? So this is cutting edge science again. And then, of course, spiritual solutions to depression are, of course, extremely important. So with everything, it doesn't matter whether it's depression or anything else, I just think the way to approach a solution is leave no stone unturned. If there are 10 things that could help, let's do all 10. And so that's one of the reasons I'm very holistic in my approach, no matter what it is that people are trying to work on. And with my broad focus, which is mind, body, spirit, people could come to me from all kinds of angles. They could be wanting to lose weight. They could be trying to fix relationship challenges. They could be saying, you talk about this thing called authentic Christianity. Could you tell me more about what that is? And I'd be happy to help them learn about that from my perspective. I often say in my book, I'm not an expert in any of these areas. All I can do is tell you what I've read, what I've learned. I can only speak for myself, and that's really all any of us can do. And so I just try to take that very broad approach with the ministry in general. The thing that makes my Happiness Reclaimed book different is it's a combination of my life story and a self help book. Because I don't imagine that most people are going to be that interested in my life story. And I am trying to constantly shift in the book to saying, here's what I learned the hard way when I went through this particular thing. And here's how you can use that to save yourself or to help yourself or to help the people you love. And so that's just the very broad approach. And I, right at the beginning of my book, I proclaim everyone's right to think freely. You know, we have a right to freedom of thought. And so I make it very clear in my book. I'm just offering you a menu of options that might be helpful, might not work for you. I don't know. But look at all this and see what might help you. You can pick and choose. You don't have to do all of that. You can just choose what works for you. And getting back to something you mentioned earlier, yes, one of the things I do strongly advocate is one of the great tools. I guess I know this from my counseling background more than my teaching background. One of the great tools for human change is start small, start simple, because we tend to get fearful if we look at that great big mountain that needs to be moved. But if we just do one little thing and get going and eliminate that inertia and start accumulating some success, then people get excited, they get energized, they see that first little bit of success, and then they are off like a rocket. And so I've just learned by working with people, changing their communication and so on, that that's a really good way, no matter what it is you want to change. And one last comment, on my homepage, I make the point there isn't a human on the face of the earth who doesn't feel some kind of pain or have something that they want to see improved. So this applies to everyone.
Well, that is just amazing and makes me look forward to reading your book in full as soon as I possibly can. We've been talking today to Carol Diane. She has written a book called Happiness Reclaimed. You can learn more about the book itself and her ministry online at happinessreclaimed.com. You can also learn more about Samaritan Ministries at samaritanministries.org. All of the information you need to find out the details and learn what you need to know to help yourself in these areas will be found there. Carol, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been very informative, and I thank you for sharing it with our listeners. God bless you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon, and may God bless you and your ministry as well.